Hey, everyone. Thank you all for lasting this long and kind of getting through all these fantastic panels. I've learned a lot myself. So today, for the last panel, we're going to talk about how clients are using tech on the job site. So I'm Hugh Seaton. I'm the general manager of Crosswalk from CSI, as well as the host of the Data and Construction podcast and some other things. Super excited to dig into how things are used on the job site, how they even get on the job site. Before that, I'd like to introduce our panel. So we've got three panelists, all of whom are in the middle of this decision and also the kind of adoption of technology on the job site. So I'm going to start with Ryan Hittie from Brasfield and Gorrie.
Hey, Hugh, thank you. And thank you all for having me here today. Ryan Hittie, I've been at Brasfield and Gorrie for about 4 years now. I manage the drone program for the company, and I'm also heavily involved in the laser scanning and 360 camera initiative at the company. So part of our group's role in the company is to be constantly searching for new technologies that will help our company and our partners become more safe and effective at the building process.
Excellent. So I think we're going to go to Hamza Shambari from Haskell. Hamza.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Ken, Ben, for hosting us. This is going to be an interesting panel. And all the previous panels were great. So my name is Hamza Shambari. I'm a director of innovation here at Haskell. We actually have a separate entity called Disruptech that's looking at all these new technologies, evaluation in a systemic way and in a structured manner. And we have a full kind of innovation program internally to harness all these great ideas that our people have.
Awesome. Last but not least, Bill Bennington from PCL.
Thanks, Hugh, for the introduction. I'm Bill Bennington. I've been with PCL for 17 years. I started with PCL right out of school. I started as a field engineer and then project engineer, project manager, and then I was a VDC manager for our Orlando district, kind of our southeast region. And then recently, 5 years ago, took over as national quality manager at the corporate level. So when I was wearing VDC hat, I was very involved with adoption, implementation of new technology in our Orlando district. And then as I moved to my current role as national quality manager, I've maintained a high level of involvement with our field technologies, such as 3D photos and 360 photos, laser scanning, drone operations, quality monitoring applications, those kind of field-driven technologies. So
awesome. So I think we're all going to get on. There we go. So this group, as everyone has just heard, is kind of in the middle of the question of what might work on a job site, how would it fit into the job site? And I want to start with the first question might be, how do you even hear about these things? So I'll start with Ryan, let's say, but how do you hear about new technologies?
Yeah, so we hear about new technologies in a number of different ways. Of course, media outlets, promoting new technologies or writing new stories about other construction companies using this technology. We have existing vendors in place that we work with, and sometimes they'll partner with a new startup to offer something new. Then we'll get into a new technology that way. And really, social media has supercharged the distribution of information these days. So, new tech is always great fuel for that viral video or viral post. The dancing robot kind of catches everybody's attention, and then people start asking questions. Can we get that? What is that? How does that work? So that's just a few of the ways we hear about it.
Cool. Hamza, how about you? You're involved in a bunch of groups that I know about. So you got your
very similar approach for sure. But there's also all kind of conferences and virtual get-togethers like this one that you see. You might not think a lot about it, but those sponsored by, those are some companies that that you haven't seen before. You're like, oh wait, let me check them out. But also like peer groups. So we have plenty of different groups that we meet together on a regular cadence, just to kind of share notes, compare what we're doing, what they're doing, what worked for them, what didn't, and that way we're all on the same page. But I mean, conferences are the main really value prop for that.
And Bill, how about you? Make the round.
More of the same.
Okay.
I mean, it's the only thing I'd add, we have like a idea scale program in house too, where ideas funnel up from the field And that introduces us to new technologies as well. But same thing, conferences, LinkedIn, relationships within the industry, these peer groups that everyone's mentioned.
How about sales? I mean, I got to imagine your inboxes get pinged once in a while. How does that work for you?
Yeah.
Anyone?
We get hit up by lots of salesmen.
Yeah. So if you think about, you're seeing stuff at industry groups, you're seeing stuff online, you're saying to the point that Ryan even started off with, a lot of stuff you can see. But, then you get pinged by a salesperson. How are you guys managing all that?
There's a filtering process. And I think it's true with any group. When a salesman's trying to sell you something, that's not surprising. And it has less impact, right? Like when we're trying to roll stuff out even to our field staff, like it's more impactful if I have a superintendent talking to superintendents about things that benefit superintendents. And it's, so I think people put more weight on things that come in through peer groups or through success stories or, those kind of avenues, I think carry a little more weight with the audience. But
yeah, I mean, I would add to that as salespeople, SDRs especially, reach out to tons of people within the company, right? Some of them are more creative than others, so I'll give them kudos to that. I've got a bunch of very creative messaging that got attention, so that's always interesting. But what we have is kind of, as Bill was mentioning, is we create kind of like a systemic kind of filtering process internally for DisrupTech, and the way that we're always marketing internally. We're trying to expose our field personnel or even people in the office about all these different solutions that we know about. But the more we're doing it, the more not only they're getting interested in trying it out, but also when they get reached out by a salesperson or an SDR, they kind of funnel it back to us. They're like, oh yeah, you talk to these guys, and then we'll, if they see value, then we'll be talking to you.
Yeah, we've in the last couple of years, we've had to add. We have a little startup checklist. Is this going to be a good pilot? And we hear the pitch, and we kind of go through this and that, the other decision-making process. And we've added, can you take yourself off mute so we can hear your pitch to our checklist of questions that have to be answered? That's been a little hiccup now. So trust is becoming more and more important for us because now we're doing these pitches virtually. We can't lay hands on the product or the softwares, and what we see is a highly idealized state of the software. So, it's a little tougher these days to filter because everything looks good online behind the computer screen. You don't know till you're on site whether or not it's worth its weight.
Yeah, SDRs are doing a great job, but marketing people are doing even a better job.
But that speaks to, I think, a really important point. Like Hamza, you kind of implied that there was a process where your team gets more and more trust internally that no, send it to them first because I need to know that they think this isn't going to fall down. Has that changed over time?
It only gotten a little bit better in a sense. I wouldn't say like we changed the way that we're looking at things, but we've gotten a little bit more methodical, a little tighter, and the turnaround time of quickly realizing if this technology fits within our tech stack and who might be our audience internally within Haskell that we can reach out to and very quickly get a pulse on, is this something that would bring value to them or not? But we like the idea that they trust us now with what we kind of provide, and we have our own readiness index of each of these technologies that we talk to, that we understand, that we dissect, sometimes look under the hood, ask for a sandbox or a test environment just to actually literally test it and check it out before we put it in front of our final end users.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you got Bill and Ryan? Do you guys kind of filter this by a tech stack, by like what's going to fit with what else is going on?
Absolutely, and we also are kind of that central point that makes sure that we don't have concurrent pilots going on at different times in different areas of the country or within the company, or if we've already had a pilot, they can use us as that reference point to say, hey, we ran a pilot, here's the feedback from the team, here's kind of our analysis of how things went. So we're that central point to kind of keep a finger on the pulse of all those things that are happening.
So you bring up something that is probably not answerable, but I'm going to ask you anyway. when you think about kind of the carrying capacity of the company to test things. I mean, we've kind of addressed earlier in an earlier session this idea about how we were supposed to be a laggard industry, but I got to tell you, the amount of pilots that go through construction companies, I'm not sure there are many accounting companies that do quite so many. So it is a reasonable question: what's the carrying capacity? Do you guys have a number in your head where you're like, look, whether it's because the innovation team or the project teams or whatever it is, here's about what we can handle?
We don't have a specific number per se, but it's kind of just what we can handle effectively. You know, given the nature of construction jobs, we have 10 jobs in startup or 20 jobs in the middle of construction and 2 jobs at the end of construction. And if a startup smart contracts provider comes to us, you know, the only jobs we have going on are in phase when all the contracts are signed, that's not really going to be a good fit for us. So maybe we put that on the back burner until the next project starts up. So it's for us, it's what can we handle for us, and then what we want to add value to the startups as well. So we don't want to bring on someone, a company, and just let them show us their stuff, spend their time and money on a demo, and then say, oh, well, we're not starting a project for another 2 years, so we'll call you back.
Hamza, how do you guys think about that?
Very similar way. We do have, you know, our capacity is, you know, very limited, you know, bandwidth. We have a small team. We have a nimble team of 4. But I mean, again, once we find a team that's ready to pilot this and they're excited, and we kind of set up an implementation plan, you know, measuring success, what it looks like and all that stuff, it's really a handoff in a sense. But we keep in taps, we keep like holding bi-weekly meetings and just to kind of check pulse and help them support throughout that process of the pilot project. But to Ryan's point, I mean, there's so much going on that you don't want to go put in so many technologies on the same team. You get technology overload. Everybody kind of just like puts their hands up and say that's just like too much. So yeah, we try to divide and conquer and make sure that at the end of the day, if this brings value, it has to kind of all feed into the single source of truth. For us, you know, it's different for each company, but for us, it's like Procore. So that's one of the main questions that we ask very early on is like, does this integrate with Procore? Can we dump all that data back in there? So that's kind of where we're trying to go with it. All these point solutions have to kind of go back to the central point.
Yeah. Bill, you started, or at least a big part of your career was VDC. So you've kind of been, and I think a lot of innovation folks began with VDC because often that was the most sophisticated computers that were, or anyway, software that was being used. And it's like, oh, the smart guys, let's get them.
Yep.
How, you know, kind of after or following from what Hamza was just saying, how do you guys think over the years, the degree of connectivity of kind of job site technology seems to have changed a lot? Is that a big filter for you, or is it a okay, we need it, but if once in a while it's okay if it doesn't? It's in terms of like the tech kind of integrating with a bigger system. I mean, anyone can answer. I don't mean to pick on Bill.
Well, most of these answers are it depends, and I think this one's similar. You know, I think the real key is, does it bring value to the team? Does it make their life easier, faster, more efficient? You know, and if it brings that value, there are things we can do on the back end. A lot of these techs have open APIs, or, you know, in-house, we can kind of build those bridges if it's the right tool for our needs, right? So there's some flexibility on that end, but the real question is, does it bring value to the company, to our processes?
I asked because it sounded a little bit like Hamza's filter's a little bit tougher. That they got a really high bar if they're not connecting into, it sounds like Procore, but anyway, your stack.
Right. And so, that's by design.
Yeah.
Because we spent so much resources and effort into standing up, you know, Procore, making sure everybody knows how to use it, how to get access to it. The more different platforms, different dashboard that you start looking at, the more you take away from that central point. So that's why we're always trying to get back to that. We have an additional filter that we try to not even touch until we go through a successful pilot, which is like, are you SOC 2 compliant? This is like our IT people talking.
We've got one more, it's not really a requirement, but one more thing that we think about when we're doing pilots. You know, every new pilot, every new company has their own platform, so that you have this one website for drones and this one website for management and one website for PDFs. And so we are constantly looking for, does technology A mesh or have an integration with technology B? Because everyone's set up on Procore and PlanGrid. We don't want to get a new data provider that doesn't integrate with those, because we're already so established and everybody knows how to use it. So we want to integrate new technologies that also work with our old technologies. We don't just want to blast a new, wipe your board, we're starting over, here's this new tech, it's the only one you're going to use. That wouldn't be effective for anybody, I don't think.
Yeah, I've got good news. We found something. The bad news, you need 6 weeks. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we found too that it's really important that we're finding technologies that support our existing processes, right? Like, we don't want to vary from our processes. And as long as we're finding tech that aligns with our processes, it is easier to swap out one for the other, because our teams are, trained and consistent with our process. And if the tool aligns to our process, then it is easier to plug and play different tools, because we're not changing process with every different application, So I think that's another filter that we kind of look at.
And it seems, at least, maybe I'm being overly positive here, that companies, I'm thinking software a little more than hardware, have gotten better at listening to what the process is. That maybe 10 years ago things were a little bit kind of shoved down the field's throat, whereas now, that everybody knows that's a bad idea. I mean, you can't. This will, every conference you hear that. Have you guys kind of seen a big shift about how much they listen? And even during the piloting phase, you guys are at least some of the software companies talking to you about how to apply what they have into your process? I see nodding heads.
Field driven, yeah. I mean, we try to. So that's a very important point, Hugh, is the pull methodology, right? We're trying to get our field team, but I always kind of go back to office because we're a design build company, that want to try that technology, right? That's step one, right? If you're just saying, no, you need to use this, it's not going to work out as well. We try that too. But from taking it, like what you're looking at it is from the other perspective, which is from the service provider perspective. They are always, willing and able, and they have usually they would have like a customer success team that would help us in the early phase of designing the implementation strategy for that specific technology, and what does success look like, how do we measure it, and they would kind of make sure that we are hitting those KPIs that we're setting for that, with a caveat that I try not to communicate way too much of our success criteria, because if they focus 100% on that, and you make it hit it 100% of that, that doesn't mean it's going to happen the next time, right? You might not get that level of support. So we just try to keep some of those KPIs for ourselves internally evaluating.
That's funny. They'll teach to the test.
We found when we have startup meetings that we're structured a little differently, do things a little differently than XYZ contractors. So sometimes it does help us to sit down with the company up front and say, here's how we're structured, here's how we work. Does your product work with that workflow? Because we've had some companies that gave us a really good product, but it did not fit our workflow. And instead of syncing to this one project, it synced across the organization, and folders started popping up on project A and project B's folder structure, and it just wasn't working for us. So also to that point, we are, since a little archaic sometimes. People say that the whole construction industry. So when we come in with a new PDF program that can annotate and then cut notes and copy handwritten notes into automatic text, and vendors come to us and show that to the field crew. Some of the field crews saying, well, how do I import the PDF? How do I open the program? So we kind of work with the vendors to say, keep it simple, crawl first, show them, here's how you import, just turn off all your super fancy features and start out with, here's import and here's a red pen, mark up the annotation and then share it. And then we'll add more and more features as you go on. Because you don't, to y'all's point earlier, if you flood the whole project team with all these features, they're going to throw their hands up and say, that's too much. I've been doing this for 50 years. Why do I need to change? I'm not going to do this. all at once. You got to stair step everybody into the process to get some change bought in with.
Yeah. It's funny. It's a cliche that you usually need to trim more than you need to add. And it's a cliche for a reason, right? We've got a thing, and we got another thing, and then we've got the thing, and it's like we just need one thing. So we have a question from Rick in the audience. So how do you guys think about prioritizing technologies that you're focusing on? We talked about the field, the pull from the field, but you've got a lot of field teams. You've got potentially a lot going on. How do you guys think about prioritizing what you're going to spend time on?
We've only got a handful of core innovation group members, so it's really not feasible for us to think we can get a pulse for the whole industry and figure out what's going on. So a lot of times those crafty salespeople will hit up our field teams, and the field team will come to us and say, hey, this actually solves a problem we're having on this job. So that's one way we can say, if y'all think it's a problem for y'all and this might solve it, then we'll proceed with investigating a pilot and talking a little more with the company. But it's definitely, we definitely need help from the outside world. We can't do it all ourselves. There's just not enough resources and time of day for that, for a handful of people to do that. You got to get it from the whole project team. The ones in the field building, we're in the office, not so much out in the field managing subs and materials all day. So the field side is where a lot of the innovation is driven for us.
So go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to echo what Ryan said. I think the prioritization comes from the field, right? Like we keep a pulse on what's happening out in the field, and we keep a pulse on what technology is available. And then when someone comes to us with a problem, and we think back, oh, hey, I saw this demo of the software that might address that problem. So that kind of dictates the prioritization of things, right? Like we never want to be a solution run around looking for a problem. That doesn't go well. So the prioritization kind of takes care of itself.
But are there sometimes corporate, mandate is the wrong word, but themes where like safety obviously comes up all the time, but Hamza, you mentioned that Procore has become a kind of organizing principle that can't have come from the field unless it's an incredibly enlightened, powerful field team. So there must be some level of hey, we want to look into reality capture. Let's just think about that. Does some of that happen? I get that you can't force that on a team that's not ready to use it. But are there some corporate initiatives as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, echoing what Bill and Ryan said, is we always keep track of everything that's happening in the tech world. Just keep looking at demos, keep understanding their solution, their problem statement, and log it, structurally in a database that we can refer to it. But then we have our, strategic meetings with our operations team headed by our COO that talks about, all right, so what's the vision for this quarter, for example? Let's say we are focusing on safety on a very specific aspect. So elevated platform safety. What do we have for that? Is there anything that can help us become better? And that's when it's so easy for us because we have that structured database to go back and say, hey, we have these 4 different service providers. Let's take a look at them. Let's try to an initiative with a director of safety, VP of safety, whatever, from the top, right? And understand that if they see value in it, then they're going to talk to the people in the field and get the buy-in to test it out, to pilot it, to try it, and then it goes from there.
And our corporate-driven innovation policy, it's a little open-ended. There are some times where the whole corporate team supports innovation, but they don't say, well, y'all need to look specifically for contract management softwares. That's what we need to focus on. But when there's some technologies like drone technology, for example, there had to be a corporate mandate and a corporate guidance for drone technology because there's a Federal Aviation Administration who dictates what we can and can't do with that. So if there's ever a federal PDF administration, maybe we'll get some more corporate dictations from that. But that's really the only true direction and forced kind of direction that we have to go from with the corporate directives. But other than that, they're just supportive and want to see the whole company succeed.
Got it. So Hamza, you kind of implied that there's a knowledge management. That's the word I'm going to apply to it. And I've talked to a number of contractors who have gotten to a point where whether they call it a database or some people are actually using knowledge management software. Are you guys organizing it that? Are you finding you're increasingly organizing this because there's just so much and there's no way you're remembering what happened 15 demos ago?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's so many funky names, it's ridiculous. We can't even spell it a lot of times. But yeah, I mean, we're using a CRM that, ties to our Outlook and just automatically logs a lot of these different interactions, any slide decks that were shared, proposals, all of that stuff. But then we add additional
Notes,
kind of like feel to it, right? So what problem statement are they solving for? So that way, if I say, like, if I want to pull up for like reality capture solutions, I just immediately find anything that has a reality capture associated with it. But yeah, it's keeping it very organized and very easy to pull that data.
Bill, how do you guys kind of square that circle? Because again, it's the volume alone.
Yeah, we go through a formal pilot process that includes, outlining our goals and expectations for the pilot, and then we capture feedback from the teams, and all that's documented and recorded and available to our team. So
cool. And Ryan, how about you guys? What's your kind of management of this whole thing?
We keep detailed notes. At the end of our process, we make what we call an A3. It's just got a kind of a little picture, a little description of the technology, how it was utilized, what problem it solved. And then we have to review that list of pilot projects and companies that we've worked with, because just 2 days ago, we were discussing, we need a solution for this or try to find a solution for that. And then, well, didn't we do that with this company and that company? And we're like, that was 4 years ago, and 4 years in tech is 20 years in normal life. So we're like, maybe we should talk to them again. We need to go back and revisit the ones that weren't successful then, might have been limited by 5G technology. And now we have that. So we're constantly going back and reviewing the companies we've worked with and the technology we worked with, because it's changing so quickly every single day.
What a way to make a salesperson's day. They get an inbound call.
Yeah.
They get super excited about that. I
can imagine. Wow. And have you had success when you go back that they've had a couple of years of development? Some of them probably are gone, but have you had success where they've had a time to mature a little bit and they're just a better offering?
Yes, there's actually a couple of companies that we've gone back and said, here were our criteria last time, what we needed that y'all didn't have. And now they've checked off 3 of the 4 criteria that we had on that list. So it's been refreshing. The ones that are still there are catching up and meeting the needs and are better able to serve the needs that we're looking for. So yeah, we've had some success. Sometimes, like you said, the company goes under and we just scratch it off the list and pour one out.
Yeah.
Well, that's also kind of part of it, Hugh, which is like all of these learnings, right, that we learned from a pilot project, whether fails or succeeds, we share it back with the technology provider. That way, to Ryan's point, they can see how they failed or what do they need to work on and all that stuff. And we keep kind of like that constant pulse on them. If we see that they have a valuable product, but they're failing in that very specific aspect, we keep a pulse on them and then get back to it.
Love it. So speaking of things not quite working out, if you were to characterize the types of technology that have a tough time on the job site, what would you say? Whether it's, I don't know, punch lists or drones or reality capture, just kind of generically, are there certain things that you got to either give extra attention to or just really kind of pay attention because they struggle?
Worker tracking.
Yeah.
Worker tracking fails more often than not because people don't like to be tracked. So they find ways to break it. So we have to kind of sell them on the value prop, what's in it for them and all that stuff. And it's not usually cut and dry, right? So there's always some people that they don't like it. So they're going to find a way to work around it.
We've seen robotics kind of hit that same wall. It's not so much, we see the value and say, oh my gosh, well, this could save us time from walking around and being in unsafe spaces, and other people in the field say, well, this is going to take my job. I don't want that here. Like, get it away. So we have to balance that. This isn't a replacement. It's a tool, and it's going to help you do your job more effectively, more safely. So those are the kind of the technologies that are pushing buttons maybe in the wrong way on our field sites.
Does that happen with quality as well, with sort of punch listing and quality and all that, Bill, that people feel like you're there to judge them?
No, people love quality.
Okay.
No, I mean, you have to build relationships and come at anything with this approach of support and help, right? You're not there to police anything or come down on them. So I think actually in those types of, issue management, punch list, those types of tech, I think people are, it's kind of a, if you don't have a system in place to make that more efficient, it can be a very arduous process.
Yeah.
So people are open to those kinds of technologies because it's straightforward and it simplifies the process. So I would put those areas on the list of challenges. So.
Yeah, it's pain relief.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that a great question just came up that I think is nice is how much does the process change because you've got technology? So we talked about fitting the technology to the process, but once in a while the technology is new enough and presumably good enough that it changes how people do things. How often can't happen a lot, but is that something that you guys are a part of? How does that work? Or does it work?
Yeah, I think, there's technology. We kind of put technology in two buckets. There's a bucket that makes human efforts and manual processes more efficient. And then there's like this magic bucket. Like, I don't care how many engineers you have on a job site, they can't laser scan it by hand, right? So it depends what bucket you're dealing with, but I think it's tricky if you're changing your process. And if you're changing your process by just removing steps, I think that's okay. Because, we have these tried and true processes that we have to move through. But if it's wildly changing your process, then I think you need to take a hard look at that and see if that's really bringing the value to your organization that you think it is. So,
yeah,
I would agree with that.
A lot of that procedural change, it's not an overnight. There are technologies that revolutionize things, but I don't feel like you can change this industry process that's been around for this long immediately. Like to Bill's point, laser scanning has been around. We could theoretically, when we pour a concrete slab, laser scan it and do a floor flatness analysis before it's cured and figure out where high and low spots are and goes, smooth them out before it cures. But that's just not how the process works right now. So the technology's there and the equipment is there, but the process is a little bit slower. Even though it's a great use case, it's just not, the process hasn't caught up or accepted that new way of doing things just yet.
And I would assume no one's going to change a process in the middle of a project anyway, right? It would have to be part of how you plan the project up front, which is not exactly a time where people have a lot of time to spare. Right. So there's got to be a little bit of a challenge up there. So another question that came from the audience: to what degree are owner preferences part of some of the decisions that you're making at all?
I wouldn't call them preferences. I would call them mandates. But yeah, sometimes they say, like, we're using this. We need you to use that. You're like, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And just that's what you use. But a lot of times we go to the owner and we say, here are things that will, help us deliver this project with more value, safer, more efficiently. And sometimes they are more open to it. Other times they're not. But that's why we kind of have DisrupTech here as a separate entity that not only evaluates and drives those pilots, but also funds a lot of portions of it. So that way it's not a burden on the project team that, if the owner is not paying for it, then we're not going to charge it to the project budget to try it out.
I'll share one refreshing story from one of our project pursuits. It was a university near one of our offices, and we laser scanned that they wanted the new stadium renovation. So we laser scanned every single room, every corridor, every locker room, workout room, flew the drone around the whole outside, made a nice model with the drone and meshed the laser scan and the drone point cloud and the VDC's model together and presented it. It was one of the most innovative things that any of us had ever seen. And the university said, okay, this is a great start. What else do you have? So they now say, table stakes for us is laser scan, drone flight, and models. Like that's becoming a standard for them. So that was, for us, as innovation in virtual design world, that was phenomenal. We want everybody to be like that. But That's kind of, we saw that shift in the owner preferences on that one particular job, and it was for the positive too.
That's great. So I'm going to end with a couple of questions about the kind of the role of the process, and specifically I want to start with one. How long should someone expect a pilot to last? I think a lot of early stage startups absolutely underestimate how long they should expect the process to take. What do you caution them they should expect? Because they also have investors, which as DisrupTech, you'll get this, that other investors are like, dude, how is this taking so long to sell? But so what's an expectation people should think of?
I think it depends on what the tech is. Like if it's a tech that analyzes your specs and creates a submittal log, then you can easily find a project that's starting up and they run that process, and a week later they've put it through its paces and you can get feedback on that, right? If there's a tech that's supposed to be used over the whole life cycle of the project, obviously, you're going to have a 2-year burn on that. So, so again, it depends on what the tech is, what, where it hits the project life cycle, what the expectations are. I would say most companies are probably too eager to run into a pilot, right? And that can be detrimental to the contractor, it can be detrimental to the tech, because if you don't find the right fit between a project team that has an actual problem they're trying to solve and they have the right attitude and they want to do this, right? And the timing isn't right, then you can have bad first impressions. You can have, it can really create issues with any relationship with that technology in the future. So I think timing is important. You have to be patient and find the right team and the right tech and wait for that to happen, and then you'll have a good pilot.
I think another hurdle that a lot of the startups face, and we kind of deal with it too a little bit, it's financial hurdle. Everybody wants the first one for free. So a lot of times the startups will provide that, and then it may or may not have worked out just well enough for us to see the value in it and prove it. So another project team says, can we try that? And then so that now the startup's stuck with, well, can we get a little bit of, can you cover our costs for that? It's like, well, you didn't really solve a problem. So that's something that the startups definitely need to think about is setting that expectation of costs and what they can and cannot deliver for free up front.
Right.
They don't want to hurt them, but also want them to have a good impression and get onto a pilot and go full scale deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo everything that Bill and Ryan said, but also I think we found the sweet spot to be a 3-month pilot. I think you can find a lot of information in 3 months, whatever the technology type it is. It could be sooner, it could be just a little bit later, but I think 3 months is a good time frame. And if I would caution any startup, I would say, don't give any free pilots, because they have to have some skin in the game. Start with a very small POC, a smaller fee, but free pilots tend to not go positively.
But it's so easy to get people to say yes to free.
Yeah.
I'm obviously being exactly. I'm obviously being facetious. So 3 months is an interesting guideline, and then you add on how long it takes to actually get to the pilot, and you're at something like 4 to 6 months. Does that make sense? Last question, and I think we're going to get booted off the stage. What is something that's we kind of covered this, but I'd love to expand on the idea. What don't technology providers understand about the field? Apart from, now you're all saying we could do a PhD on that question, but if you want to pick one, okay.
Power connectivity.
Also, I don't think they understand the cost it takes to switch from one tech to another tech. I mean, it can be a 1-to-1 ratio, right? If at an enterprise level, if it's going to cost us X, it's going to cost us another X to switch teams from one thing to another. And also when they come to the pitch, I expect them to know what our current tool is and the delta between our current tool and what they're offering. And if they're not familiar with what we're currently using, I just want to hear about the deltas, right? And if they have no idea the difference between our current solution and what they're trying to pitch, then it just makes it more difficult to get through the pilot.
And I mean, I'm assuming that at least some of that is that I'm assuming at least some of that is them asking you, kind of in the very beginning, right? I mean, they may know some of what you're using, but I think it kind of is incumbent on the person trying to get you to change, to be listening and asking questions about, okay, how are you doing it now? How, like understanding that, not only that delta, but the barriers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're at the end, and I want to thank all of you for a fantastic panel. Thank you for some great ideas. I don't see any other questions. Are there any closing comments? Because otherwise, I think we're good. Thank you all.